switch on the cameras, like it would be very much appreciated. So I hope everyone is here. Vanshika, just check like if in case like we missed anyone as such. I don't think we did, right? That's fine, right? Okay, then. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first iteration of Student Research Forum. It's great to see everyone here, and that we like even on a Sunday morning, everyone is ready and focused for deliberation in this particular matter. Um as you guys might know that the first like the agenda for the first student research forum would be surrogacy. We will be discussing about the socioeconomic and social legal aspects of surrogacy in India and what has been the recent developments to a certain extent. And in this particular forum, we are hoping to identify as many research gaps and come to as many research outcomes as possible. And let's begin with the opening statements. And before I begin, I hope that everyone is like well versed with the format and there are no preliminary doubts as such. So seeing none, then I guess uh, we should begin with the opening statements. Um yeah, Shrishti, if you would like prefer to begin to be the first.
Am I audible?
Yeah, Shrishti, you're audible.
Okay. So, hello everybody. I'm here to give my viewpoint on surrogacy laws. So, the main aim of my deliberation is to raise the issue that nation state must not adopt a prohibitive approach towards surrogacy and must strive for a uniform system. So, first of all, the proponents of the prohibitive approach to surrogacy have failed to realize that surrogacy is one of the ideal reproductive alternatives that we have for the couples who suffer from infertility. It is not also about only couples. It is also about peoples who are single, about people who are not intending to get married, like the same sex couples. For India, we do not have any regulation as to the marriage of same sex couples, but we we do not have laws like violence from domestic protection for these same sex couples, and nor do we give them the right to have a child through surrogacy. The prohibitionists also fail to acknowledge the positive motivation and experience of the surrogate mother. And the main argument against commercial surrogacy in India is that it is exploitative of women, and it serves as a commodification of a female reproductive capabilities. But we also need to understand that while we are saying that it exploit women's, we are it is in irony itself as it is failed to recognize the right of an individual to enter into a contract to make a living. And I think it is very much needed for India to get women the rights to contract and make decisions for themselves. Let me give you all a short comparative analysis of what are the laws around the world. So, when we talk about countries like France, Germany, Italy, Portugal, Spain, so they have completely banned surrogacy. Then we come to countries like UK, Ireland, Denmark. They have only allowed altruistic surrogacy, and commercial surrogacy is legal in the United States and Russia. So we also have countries like Australia, wherein some state they have criminalized going for commercial surrogacy all around the world. So this is something that actually stigmatize surrogacy. And yes, surrogacy is something that is very modern, and it is treated as a taboo all around the world. So for example, criminalization of going to another country for surrogacy. Now let me tell you a short example wherein how citizenship of the born child is also is also at fault. See, when we talk about countries like Thailand, their surrogate mother is seen as a legal mother. So the responsibility falls on the surrogate mother in case the parents don't turn up. And when we talk about countries like India, the intended parents are the legal parents of the child, wherein in UK the surrogate mother is seen as a legal mother. So in case a surrogate a surrogate mother is carrying the child of a UK parent of a UK couple, so that will be like if a child is born stateless. It is as simple as that, because in India the legal parents are the ones who are wanting to have a surrogate mother, but whereas in UK the surrogate mother is the legal mother. So after the child is born, the child is born stateless. So this is what we need to regulate, and we need a uniform system so that we can have the basic we can give the basic rights to these children. And the state, and in this case the child is born stateless and has to apply for British citizenship. So this is one thing that we need to focus on. So I'll be now briefing you about what are the possible solutions that we can come up. The Ontario Commission regulation, it suggested that it is not prohibition that will help, it is the regulation that will help in surrogacy laws. So we can have a comprehensive regulation or a law related to regulation of surrogacy all around the world. So the objective must be well defined, the guidelines must be well defined. Health insurances and things like health insurance of the child and the surrogate mother must be there in the contract. Then we should also provide remedies in case the parents, in case of death or divorce of the legal parents. Then we should also talk about in case the child is with some born with some deformity or it is handicapped. So this is something that we should all enter in the contract and the clauses of the contract. And it is very much needed for surrogacy laws to get a better implementation all around the world. It is for us to understand that surrogacy should not be treated as a taboo and must be, it is one of the most advantageous thing that a infertile couple has. So it must be promoted all around the world. And it is for the judiciary all around the world to understand that we need to have surrogacy laws as it is a cross border dispute. So better laws can actually help it. So it is not for us to prohibition is not one thing that in my opinion would support this wonderful thing as surrogacy. It is only the regulation that can help it. Thank you.
Ritvik bhai, you're on mute.
Oh yeah, thank you, Shashi. So before we move on to the next speaker, are there any questions on the floor as such? Um, Seeing none, we can move on to the next speaker. So any volunteers, or should I like name any one of you? Okay, if Vanshita.
Just a second. Actually, I have to
Hmm.
ask her one thing. Like in her, like two things. Can she explain more about the Ontario Commission regulation and which country the regulation was made? The first question will be that. And second, she mentioned that surrogacy is like without any restrictions in USA. But as per the documents that we have in USA, they are like two type. It varies from state to state. Like surrogacy friendly states like California and New Hampshire allow both commercial and altruistic surrogacy, whereas New York does not allow commercial surrogacy. So I want explanation on both of the questions I raised.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes. So, ma'am, the first question was about Ontario Commission. So, I would like to clarify that Ontario Commission report was not actually formulated. So, when we talk about Canada, they have not accepted this report because they were of a view that commercial surrogacy is not something that will be good in a long run. But my opinion is something different from what has been done. I support this commission because it talks about how commercial contracts can come into force, and the payment arrangement between both the parties can actually help both. Modest profit can be given to both the parties, so it is something that promotes commercial surrogacy, and it is not something that was accepted by Canada. But after reading the report, I find it relevant and the arguments relevant. Okay. And please, can you tell me about the second question?
The second question was, I think so. Like you did not mention about the fact that in USA the surrogacy laws varies from state to state. You skipped that point, I think so. So I would like to tell you that in USA the surrogacy laws vary from state to state, and it is not uniform in the entire country.
Yes, yes, I agree with you. I agree with you in this point. But actually, I was just making the point that USA has far more flexible approach towards surrogacy than India, and then other countries who are actually criminalizing surrogacy, going to other states and opting for surrogacy. So I just wanted to make the statement that it is far more liberal than other countries around the world.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Uh, Excuse me, I have an observation in that regard that I've also researched about that, and the countries they are criminalizing it in are usually the countries which are quasi-federal or not. They don't have a federal structure; they have a unitary structure of sorts, such as Russia. Sorry, such as India, such as UK. It is not truly federal there. So it is a pattern, and yes, you might argue that Russia is an outlier, but exceptions are not very uh, helpful in making that trend. So, what is your comment on that?
I'm not able to grasp your question. I'm sorry.
My question is that does a country's make of their government has influenced their findings and has influenced their stand on this? Because I am finding such things that in US it is very flexible because it has a total
Okay,
federal
Karthik,
structure.
if I may intervene, so I guess like Karthik is trying to say that like whether the formation of a government, whether it's federalist or unitary nature, affects the surrogacy legislation in that particular country. Like I hope I'm right, Karthik.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Karthik, it does affect the whole overall legislations in that country, because when we talk about USA, the states have more autonomy, and when we talk about India, it is only the Parliament of India that makes the laws that are actually applicable, um, the nationwide. So yeah, states do not have that much autonomy in India when we compare it with the United States.
Thank you.
Okay, then like moving on to the next speaker. Yeah, Ayushi, if you would like to go next.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Today I am going to be focusing on, as already Shrishti has told you about the laws centric to surrogacy. I'll be focusing more on the social and behavioral aspect of it. Why do people opt for it, and what is people's general social agenda towards it? So, I guess what I will start with is when you think about surrogacy, how many times in our life have we heard about it through our family, friends, or known ones? We've either heard about it through news, if there has been a case, or through celebrity culture. I feel like celebrity culture has a lot to influence when it comes to particularly surrogacy, because IVF as an option has been explored by people and infertile couples over a long time. uh, and IVF. So when we talk about modes of pregnancy and infertility, what happens is when you go through what's the structure, if a couple is unable to conceive, what they usually go for is they go for a lot of treatments. They go for a lot of gynac treatments. They go for a lot of placenta treatments. When those don't infer, then they move on to IVF. Surrogacy is not always an option for people because it is very expensive. Surrogacy as an option can only be afforded by people who have a certain structure, but not to mean that couples who are unable to conceive, who are moderately fair in their income, and who have to put in a lot of money to be able to afford that child, is only because they want some genetic kind of genetic similarity with the child. Because again, adoption is always an option, but I feel like celebrity culture has influenced the society quite a lot. And I think people's perception that, only celebrities are the people who have children through surrogacy is quite ironic in itself, because then what happens is this celebrity culture influences the people. They get to know about it. Like, we are having this conversation right now, and I've realized that there comes an uproar in conversations about surrogacy when a celebrity has a child with it. So internationally, if we're speaking, Kim Kardashian was the one who had three children from surrogacy, and that only came out after after the child was born, right? To secure the privacy of the women, to secure the privacy. But that's in the US context. Hitting more closer to home is Shah Rukh Khan and Priyanka Chopra. The latest one being Priyanka Chopra, because the day it announced, if you went on your social media platforms, all you could see was this. And that was congratulatory. And to understand the social dynamic of people's behavior about surrogacy, and why this behavior leads to the laws not being changed. Because for a government or a body to understand that there are laws, there are certain laws that need to be uh, modified, that need to be regulated better, that need to be modified generation to generation, because this is not one of those things that you can make a law right now and it won't change years in the future, because it is scientific, because it relies so heavily on scientific methods and so heavily on women's rights. So these things are quite intertwined in between, and people's perception towards women's rights has always been a little jarring. They don't always see them as what a general statement that I've heard a lot when we went out to cover people and we went out to speak to people about what their platforms about Priyanka Chopra surrogacy was. First of all, it is because she's a public persona, that is a point where it comes to having a conversation, right? So, if had she not been a public persona, had we been talking about her opting for a child through surrogacy, now the first layer of what people's behavior and like you were saying towards criminalization is because they don't have a better understanding of what the social behavior of people is. Countries do criminalize it because the people in power are, again, people who've come from the ground and who've through their own journey a little bit have understood that while they were growing up, surrogacy was not a thing. It was still and always will be a taboo in people's mind, because it delivers some sort of power and right for people to choose their own offspring. Because then there are multiple layers to it, you understand. People either have a problem with adoption, people either have a problem through surrogacy. Even in context to Indian laws right now, that a couple should only wait for 5 years until they can have a child is quite statutory, and it should not be that, because we don't understand what complications that the couple has to go through in order to get a child. This is for married couples I'm talking about. So when you talk about LGBTQ people, we are already a very slow progressing nation in terms of laws and in terms of identity for these people, who are very regular people who just have different choices. But the point is that the judiciary has a very big problem understanding that people can have different choices. So you need to make a more flexible, you need to make a more flexible forum or more flexible approach to discussing that, okay, children and children and infertility is not just that like just couples, married couples go through. It is a situation that every individual has a right to. Every individual goes through a certain level of problem. And infertility can not only stem from a lot of genetic problems, it can also stem from a lot of multiple diseases. But society's agenda towards it is, there's a lot of shame, which is my biggest point. Is one is ideal influencership from these. We expect a lot from these celebrities. We expect them to be the ball bearers of change. We expect them to be, had this conversation happened, why doesn't she go ahead and speak about it? Refer to lawmakers and refer to, if she has a contact with the prime minister, why not just go up and talk to him? But if that was the case, then all of us would go ahead and do that. Tweet at him on Twitter and tag him in Instagram post. But that is not how influencership works. She might be an influencer for us, and we put a lot of onus on these celebrities to bring about a change in society that the lawmaker should ideally do. And when you go ahead and understand the deeper layer of psychosis between what people are saying and what do they mean, and what their background influences. So when you go on these comments, the first upper layer of, for first 10% of the comments are congratulatory messages. I'm talking about Priyanka's case right now. 10% is congratulations, because now she's an international celebrity, her husband is an international celebrity, so they have a lot of influence all over the world. They are one of the biggest power couples. Next, you come to the second layer, is people are like, okay, congratulations, but why surrogacy? People want to know why surrogacy. People want to know, why would she opt for surrogacy if she can have a child, and if her contemporaries are having children through natural processes? If her contemporaries are giving natural birth, why not Priyanka? Then comes the hate, and then comes the actual meaning that what people feel: shame, body shaming, age shaming, not understanding that women have a right to choose how they should operate their bodies and what do they want from their bodies. The third part of the comments was, she this could go a little, like, I'm going to refrain from the words that were actually used in the comments, because I don't think that's suitable for the forum. But it hinted to the lines of that, because she has money and because she does not want to disfigure her body, which is a thing that happens, which is a very natural thing that happens when you give birth naturally as well. Your body does go through a lot of big changes. So because she does not want to give birth to, she does not want to ruin her figure, is a sentence that people have used. And these women are too busy to have children. This is a direct quote from the Guardian, which that having a child is does not fit in their busy schedules. So referring to, I went through a lot of in my observation, and in my, just to just read about why people think about surrogacy the way that they do. I just went through a couple of sites, spoke to a little bit of comments, but I realized that the researchers and the articles are very well thought of, they are very well provoked, but to actually understand what people's psyche towards it is, and my main point is that the celebrity, the whole celebrity and the glam factor of it all, that we're talking about it only because a certain influential person is going through it, should not be the case. Because then the main idea, the main agenda of surrogacy laws for women who do actually do it for as an income generation purposes, I'm talking about the surrogates here who do it through income generation purposes, because then they do not have any methods of gainful employment. And by not giving them proper regulation, by not giving them proper facilitation, what we're doing is we are curbing their rights to a gainful employment. We're also leading up to a lot of illegal and unlawful exploitation, where we might have a lawful and regulative exploitation. Here we are not. So what we're doing right now with altruistic surrogacy is, we're asking them that you should give time ahead. You should put 9 months of your body through hell and back, but you should not be paid for it. So that does not nobody is going to do surrogacy out of goodwill. It only happens in movies and books, and we do rely from movies and books. In case example, Mimi, their latest film starring Kriti Sanon, that was one of the movies where a young leading actor has done a role about surrogacy. But then again, it is about hero worship. That is what it becomes in the end. It started as a movie that was giving out influence. It started as a movie that was giving me knowledge that I never knew, that there was such a dark side to surrogacy. that people from all over the world do come to India because India has some of the cheapest surrogates. And I don't think where the movie could have spoken about things is change of the laws and everything. It has made the it has gone again through the hero and villain story, and it turns into making Mimi the hero, and while not talking about surrogacy laws as they should be. So I feel like when we talk about surrogacy in celebrity eye, we are blindsiding the needs of the people who actually opt for it. It is not just a modern day solution. It was happening before. Just because it wasn't out in the open and not spoken about, it is a culture that is followed a lot in tribal areas, in areas from where I come from, areas where I have seen that if you do not have the means to go ahead and afford a surrogate, this has been happening for a lot of long time in tribal areas specifically. And because they are more modern in their approach, I feel like we always masquerade the idea of uniformity, the idea of regulation, the idea of a better world in the terms of these are modern day requirements, but these are just basic human rights that a person should not be able to we as a community, we as the citizens of the country should not be enforcing our rules and our personal ideologies on the masses. There should be more uniformity, there should be more regulation on the law as to avoid curbing and dissenting and criminalizing these laws is not going to help out.
Yeah, Ayushi, I'm so sorry to interrupt. Like, if you could wrap up in 30 seconds, if it is possible,
Yeah,
just because of
I
the
was just
paucity of
coming
the
to that.
time.
Yeah, I was just coming to that.
Hmm.
So it's just criminalizing these laws, and we have to separate the idea of the celebrity from the main issues, because then the main ideals, the main issues, the main mid-level 2 tier 3 tier city surrogates and these the lives of these parents, these couples, they get blindsided. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, so before we move on to the next speaker, any questions, any disruptions in that particular on the particular opening statement message?
Yeah, I have one question, and if I'm audible.
Yeah, yeah, yes, you're audible.
Okay, hi, good morning, Ayushi. I just had one question as you put forward the problems associated with altruistic surrogacy. But you do realize that in our patriarchal society, women alone cannot make decisions. Sometimes they have to undergo the pressure from the pressure of making decisions from their husbands. I mean, what in those situations, because you cannot regulate the domestic affairs in a community like that as in India, right? So if we are talking about altruistic surrogacy, I think regulating that 5 year, because many women are into this because of their financial background, right? So if we are talking about altruistic surrogacy over here, I think it is more prevalent in the upper class family rather than the lower class. So how do you see that as a problem? I mean, could you like shed light on that? And as you thought, and as you very rightly put forward, that is more prevalent in tribal areas. And in when we come to urban areas, it is more prevalent in the upper class uh, families, right? So
So, if I have got your question right, you're talking about how altruistic surrogacy is more prevalent in the upper class society than rather in the rural areas, and how in the rural areas it affects their more domestic affairs, right? That they have to get their husband's consent and all. So, in my condition, I don't think there should be a classification of commercial or altruistic surrogacy, sorry, because I feel like when we bifurcate situations into either black and white, that does not leave advancement for more things. And in lower class situations, what happens with altruistic is this either leads to a lot of domestic disruption, it leads to a lot of domestic disruption, or it leads to separation from the husband. Because what happens is these rural areas, the people more often than not are not open to these ideas. They think this is all a foreign concept, and they think that it is such a matter of shame that a woman has to go ahead and it's basically like they want to say that you're selling your body. So it does lead to a lot of domestic disruptions. But uh, when people from abroad or when people from outside do decide to hire surrogates, the rural and the second tier cities are the places where they hire surrogates the most from. You won't get a lot of surrogates from the upper class cities. Upper class people are the people relying on these two-tier cities where they go ahead and get their surrogates, because it is there are a lot of factors to it. One is it's cheaper. Second, it's more easier to convince. Number three, it preludes to the illusion of there's a lot of mystery, and you don't have to tell people what is happening. You don't have to give justifications to the society. So I do think there has to be more stricter beneficial, but realizing that because this is a patriarchal society, had it been matriarchal, it would be different. But since it's a patriarchal society, and we just the idea that we have to rely on a man's consent to decide what to do with we need to do with our bodies is very baffling to me. And these women are not just doing it out of fun. This is not a passion project or a hobby. This is they only opt for surrogacy if they do not have one either of their goodwill for the other person. If they are getting monetary benefit from it, for sure. If not, the main reason why they do it is because the husband or the patriarch of the family is not able to provide. And more often than not, these women who provide surrogacy from second tier cities are the people who already have their own children. So they do it to support their own children. So the laws need to be much stricter, and the laws need to be also in keeping in consideration that there is a bifurcation in India in top 1, 2, 3 tiers. So it needs to be more protective towards people, more aware towards people who do not have a lot of awareness about surrogacy, who can be exploited easily, more vulnerable to be susceptible to be exploitation. So I think there needs to be a bifurcation of laws as well, and just dividing it into two parts, either commercial or altruistic. It's not necessary. You can make into sub bifurcations. You can keep it into subcategories. The laws have to be more catered to what how we can protect the child, the surrogate, the legal parents, and the health of all of these people.
Yeah, okay, but you do realize that most of them are not from two-tier cities. I mean, Anand, this village in Gujarat, is called the cradle of the world, right? So basically, women who are from rural areas, who are forced by their husbands to go ahead for this whole process of surrogacy, because if in some cases they are not able to provide the system needed for them to, provide for their families, right? So that's that. And how do you then see law in those situations where, like, they all have this proper chains of clinics wherein they are supposed to stay in those nursing homes so that they don't contract these diseases like HIV/AIDS and STDs in case if someone contacts their husband. That's why they are supposed to be in isolation from where they have come, right? So there is this proper regulatory framework for all of that, and they have their like these agents whom they contact, like they contact with the women basically who are into this. So I don't think so that is a problem over here. And like basically, why I am supporting for this categorization between commercialization and altruism is basically because if we are not going for this categorization, as you rightly said, then we are blindsiding, like really putting a blindfold to the needs of those people who are really into this or like and who really can't provide for their families. So I think categorization is important in that sense because they have this whole regulatory framework, this whole chain of clinics wherein they provide this proper environment for women to actually live there. So that's that, and I think I find problem with that. You not agreeing with this categorization?
I would also agree to disagree with you, because when you said there is a regulatory framework, I can guarantee you there is not. It is there. I mean, it surely exists on paper, like most of our laws do, but in reality and in execution, they don't. Because these surrogates, more often than not, if the legal parents or the adoptive parents disappear, there is no law for the woman to go ahead and give up the child. She only has two options: one, either to abandon the child, or to make sure that she takes on that another child as well. And these things might seem very, like, there seems to be a proper framework on the sense of paper, that we are told that there is a framework, but none of us have actually really gone and seen. And from what I have heard from the reports that I have read, uh, there are women who've been abandoned, who've had multiple medical issues. The hospitals that they're stayed at, these are not the most best hospitals where a woman should be given, where C-sections are happening with already used stitches. So you have to realize that this is very on in terms of health and in terms of their long term health, this is very risky. The framework does exist, but on paper.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the clinics in Delhi, Mumbai, all those metropolitan cities wherein this is happening.
I
Surrogacy is mainly,
yeah,
yeah,
I
sorry.
guess it's totally understandable, like for people who have like contradicting views. So I guess we can explore that more in the unmoderated section of the like session as such. And but like it's totally plausible that people might have deliberative like stances when it comes to these issues. So like the interesting thing about deliberation is like we cannot be concrete upon, around any particular aspect of it. So yeah, I like summing up this particular interaction. Moving on to the next speaker, Shrishti Singh, if you would like to go.
Yes, sure. So I'll focus more on the concept of legality and the concept and legality of surrogacy in India. Coming to the topic of today's discussion, which is hotly debated issue across the globe, and as of now, news headline, as recently our beloved power couple Priyanka Chopra and Nick Jonas welcomed a baby via surrogacy. So, as per artificial reproductive technique guidelines, surrogacy is an arrangement in which a woman agrees to a pregnancy achieved through assisted reproductive technology, in which neither of the gametes belong to her or her husband, with the intention of carrying it to term and handing over the child to the person or persons for whom she is acting as a surrogate. The uses of assisted reproductive technology has grown immensely around the world, and the future increases are expected. However, the practice of surrogacy and the laws governing it are not well entrenched yet. Among the two types of surrogacy, that is normal and gestational surrogacy was legalized in India in 2002, which was said to be a part of country's drive to promote medical tourism, an industry that back during that time generated the estimated USD 2.3 billion annually, which is a really huge amount for a country. But due to the absence of regulations, presence of low fertility clinics, and a large supply of poor women willing to provide the service, India became a hub for transnational surrogacy, uh, which was actually, in a way, getting wrong benefits. Like it was kind of uh, forcing poor women to surrogacy, because sometimes their family do that, sometimes they out of their current financial situation do that. But hope, like luckily, or by god grace, transsexual surrogacy gets banned in India in 2015. But even after its ban, ART and domestic commercial surrogacy have continued to flourish with the help of entrenched networks of unweighted agents and private clinics. Surrogacy in India is controlled by either ICMR, Indian Council of Medical Research, recommendations or decisions issued by the Supreme Court or High Court, and after 25th December 2021, the Surrogacy Regulation Act as well. Uh, Gestational surrogacy is further classified into two types of arrangement: altruistic surrogacy and commercial surrogacy. Currently, commercial surrogacy is illegal in India. The ART, the Assisted Reproductive Technology Act 2021, only permits ethical or altruistic surrogacy, which will be completely free of any monetary transaction or payment to surrogates. It also mandates that whoever initiates commercial surrogacy shall be punished for the first offense with the imprisonment up to 5 years or a fine of up to 50,000 rupees, and for any subsequent offense with imprisonment up to 10 years and a fine up to 1 lakh rupees. The major debate around surrogacy is the conflicting interest of its different stakeholders. On one hand, is the state duties to prevent exploitation of the surrogates and to protect the interest of the to be born child. On the other hand, is the right of the woman to make their own reproductive choices and the right of persons to parenthood. This struggle to find a balance between these conflicting interests is quite evident in India's regulation of surrogacy as well. In the name of preventing the exploitation of surrogates, the SRA precisely endorses this exploitation. As surrogates are only protected to the extent that the commissioning couple has to obtain medical insurance for the surrogate's benefit for a period of 36 months only. The act ignores the fact that surrogate mother is a mother with commitments towards her family, sometimes is a worker who may lose her job or have to take a break from her job during the pregnancy, thereby losing income. With the pregnancy culminating in a C-section, a scar for life. She is not compensated for any of this inconvenience, to put it mildly. Legislative productivity and sensitization are the need of the hour for a linear and uniform approach to the governing regulations. But until now, the non regulation of the industry in India has not significantly hindered the popularity of these procedures due to the methodological proficiency coupled with relatively cheap execution. Yet, exploitation remains rampant. Further, the exclusion of older couples, single individuals, couples in live in relationships, and the LGBTQ community hampers equality before the law and the constitutional sanctity against discrimination, as it remains restricted to heterosexual married couples of prescribed ages. Even for heterosexual married couples seeking a child born out of surrogacy, the new laws list long and tedious criteria. For instance, the provision that couples seeking surrogacy should be married for at least 5 years in an attempt at curtailing their freedom to start a family earlier if they wish so. Additionally, the couple has to include a man between the age of 26 to 55 years and a woman between the age of 25 to 50 years of age. Both have to be Indians and should have no biological, adopted, or surrogate children before the birth of the children that they are going to, unless the child is mentally or physically challenged or has a life-threatening disorder. The criteria for anyone opting to be a surrogate mother under Assisted Reproductive Technology Act states that the woman in question must be married and should have her own child. Again, she should be between 25 to 35 years of age and a close relative to the couple opting for surrogacy. I mean, the age gap is quite understandable because, 25 to 35 is the ideal age to give birth uh, to a child, and it's healthy for both the child and the woman. But in a way, close the criteria that it should be close relative of the couple opting for surrogacy is, it has both perspective. Sometimes it is uh, because not every relative of a couple will agree to be a surrogate mother for that particular couple. In a way, if we look uh, at towards the reason for which this particular clause is inserted, maybe the lawmakers intended to uh, protect the poor woman from exploitation, but it has dual result in this part in today's circumstances. So, in short, instead of making the new laws pioneering legislation that had the power to create an inclusive and egalitarian society, the lawmakers have ended up creating contentious regulation that are likely to attract litigation in courts and hurt the very women they intend to protect. More likely, the new laws will create rather than solve the problems the government intended to address, and it renders women reproductive labor entirely invisible in a way. Thank you. So, anyone have any question?
Hello. I would just like to point out one thing, that when you mentioned about the surrogacy bill, the marriage age that was earlier kept as 5 years, after the recommendations of the select committee, I guess, if I'm not wrong, the marriage age has reduced now for 1 year. That means there is a no marriage age gap as of now in the law. So that is one thing that I found, that you spoke, like you said 5 years, but the law has been changed. So that is something I want to make point it
But
out.
I'm referring to the 2020 Act only, in which it says that it should be 5 years.
No, no, no. It has been changed, because when the first time it was passed in 2019 in the Lok Sabha, it went to Rajya Sabha, and then 63 recommendations were given to it. Out of one, this was also one of the recommendations. So the final bill which has been made here, it doesn't list the marriage age to be 5 years. So that is one thing I wanted to point out.
All right, I'll look into it again.
Yes.
Okay, so like moving ahead as such, Uh, like so, Akansha, if you would like to go ahead, and if and again, like I hope that there are no more questions on the floor in this for this particular opening statement. Yeah, seeing none. Yeah, Akansha, feel free to go ahead.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this forum session. Now, surrogacy is a spectacular journey, unreal to most, resulting in and reminding us of the greatest gift a person can ever give or receive, yielding in an amazing journey. It sounds beautiful, right? But is it actually so beautiful in the real life? So let's talk about the aspects over here, and I'll be more discussing about the fact of the history that how surrogacy evolved in India. Now, in 2002, surrogacy was surrogacy was legalized in India. Now, this resulted in the boost of the medical tourism, and India is often referred as the medical. India is often a destination for medical tourism for the different foreign nationals because of the low cost. Second, and because of the less framework of the less paperwork. Now, this resulted that we saw by 2012 that India became the surrogacy hub of the world, and it resulted in a $2 billion economy. Now, this also resulted that this commercialization was most of availed by the foreign nationals, and it resulted in the exploitation of the Indian poor people, especially the sex workers. This also sex workers. So in 2015 surrogacy for foreign nationals were banned. In 2016 a bill was passed in Lok Sabha to introduce the regulations revolving around surrogacy, but because the bill was not able to be introduced in Rajya Sabha, it again was introduced in 2019 and got passed in 2020 after a 64 recommendations made by Rajya Sabha. Now, this bill can also be discussed in the ambit of the ART bill that was passed in 2021. Now, ART bill is the Assistive Reproductive Technology Bill. So here, what we now I would like to distinguish between the ART bill and the surrogacy bill. Now, ART bill talks about the all the medical treatments that revolves around the fertility issues of couples. It also involves married couple, live-in couples, and foreign nationals as well. It also involves two-party system and a three-party system. So it is a more of an umbrella term. Now, when we talk about surrogacy, it is limited only for Indian married couples, and it does not allow foreign nationals. Now, as of now, more than there is less than 4,000 40,000 ART clinics under regulation in India, and less than 1,000 surrogacy clinics in India. So this bill also aim to brought everything under its control. Now, this bill, I'm talking about the ART bill as well as the surrogacy bill. This will establish boards in both the central and the national level to maintain regulations in both of them, and will also include it will also include offenses like selling, purchasing, trading, or importing human embryos or gametes, using intermediates to obtain donors, exploiting, commissioning couple, women, or gamete donor in any form, and transferring the human embryo into a male or an animal. So both the bill, using its regulation, it tried to curb all the exploitations that we saw before the proper regulations were made. Now, I want to discuss about some of the aspects of the surrogacy bill. Now, here it is that the surrogate mother will be given a 36 month health insurance. Now, this is a good thing, but it can also be discussed that why it should be limited to only 36 months, and that is something I would like to discuss with the entire forum. Second is that the surrogate mother should be a close relative of the family. Now, here we can also mention the two aspects. Is first is because, to let the thing in the system. Actually, my battery actually is going to go down. Just a second, okay? Okay, I'm not sure when I'll get disconnected, so just
Yeah,
don't
it's not.
mind.
It's not an
Okay.
issue.
So I think so. One of the issues that needs to be discussed here is about the mention of the close relative, because we know that Indian society is so closed. Now, when a child is born, the child will always know that he or she, his mother or his father or mother is not sorry this sorry so the child will always know that who is her or his surrogate mother. So this will create a lot of family issues, and that is why I think so this particular issue must be discussed in a larger context and not being, limited only to a close family member first. um Second, just a second, okay. Also, the point that made that the surrogate mother should have a child of her own. Now here also there can be a lot of perspectives related to this. The first is so that when she is being a surrogate mother, she doesn't develop any affection related to the child. But here we can also see that it is kind of exploitative for the other woman, because if she has a child, right, and if the child sees that her mother is carrying someone else's child, so I think so that will create a lot of barrier for both the surrogate mother and her own biological child. So these two laws I think so must be discussed in a lot of different perspectives, and must be seen that is it okay to keep it in like exactly black and white term of no of including the commercial surrogacy and the altruistic surrogacy, or can be included in a more gray term so that we can include all the benefits of the bill brought and also see that the social ethics is maintained. Thank you.
Okay, so before we move on to the next speaker, any questions in to this particular opening statement as such? Yeah. So seeing none,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, Karthik, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Okay, so surrogacy is relatively new in India and has been under a lot of scrutiny. May it be social, may it be legal. But after 2016, there has been laws for that. And my main concern about those laws are everyone is hyper fixated towards the surrogate itself, not the parents. So my main issues which I would address are: is the ART and Surrogacy Regulation Act exclusive to gender and marital status? As we can see, it is basically catered towards people who are married, and there are many things which are to be considered. If we see the sections, section 1, and section 1 is basically the short title. Section 2, that is introductions. There's my mouse. Hmm. So in that, in Surrogacy Regulation Act, Chapter 1, in the second article, sorry, second section, we can see, if we go down to uh, subsection, if you go down to subsection, what is that? Is this? Yes, R, intending couple,
Karthik,
and S,
sorry
intending
for
woman.
interrupting. Could you
Yeah.
either share screen or share the link to this?
Sure, sure. So this is the Surrogacy Regulation Act about which I am talking, and in that there is no mention of a single father, or even if we consider the married couple, it is very ambiguous, or rather I should say that it is catered towards heterosexual people as so much, not to the homosexual people. So it stems from a second issue, that is the marriage hetero, should the marriage be heterosexual to invoke ART and surrogacy? It is my issue to be asked. And in my research, I have not found such claims where there is any mention of a homosexual couple. This is a problem which I had seen. And while reading this not article, while reading this piece of legislation, I've also come about things like there is too much framework for too less things. That a national board has to be set up, a state board has to be set up, but do we need them? It is my question to be asked. And at last, while researching it, I found a jarring.
Yeah, Karthik, if you could include that in your opening statement. I'm so sorry to interrupt. So basically, I guess that the question is like whether it is like inclusive of the inclusive of homosexuals and the LGBTQ genders, if I'm not wrong, right?
Yep, yep. But I was talking about another thing that while
Hmm.
researching, I also came about that the research is done, including India and the world comparison. The researches about the comparison of surrogacy in India and world are too outdated to be trusted. That
Okay.
the researches are beyond 2000, before 2016. They were 2014, 2009, 2010. So these are basically based on the legislation of 2002, which had commercialized surrogacy. So it is the research gap I have identified. That
Okay. Okay.
comparative research is to be done in this field. That's my opening statement. Thank you.
Okay. So that was your opening statement, or like that was your question? Oh, you're muted.
Both, both.
Okay. Okay. So that. Okay. Okay. Yeah, Akansha. Any comments on that?
Yes, yes, definitely. Now, I would like to give an elaborate idea, and everything will be related to my personal opinion. Now, from the 2016 Devika Biswas case, a right to produce was made a fundamental right. Now, this is one thing. Now, second, first, let me talk about the heterosexual couple. Now, let's talk about in the case of first about the Indian term, right? In the 2019, if I'm not wrong, Section 377 was scrapped, right? I think so. This was one of the biggest milestone that we achieved, but can we say that that's something that was done on paper is actually accepted in the ground itself? There is so much taboo till date involved in accepting a homosexual couple, right? So when at a stage where India is at a stage when first we have to accept the homosexual couple, so don't you think that person, any the society will accept their child? So I think so. First, we must make a progress in making a homosexual couple acceptable in the society and living with dignity, and then we can talk about the children being accepted and living with dignity in the society. Now, that is my personal opinion. Now, the second point, what I want to say is something regarded to adoption in India. Now, in India, we see that single fathers cannot adopt a girl child. Now, I personally think that this is a very good particular thing, because when we come to a lot of, and I'm not talking only about the rural thing, but in the urban areas, we see that the family members itself, the male family members exploit their own daughter, their own child. So when, and even when they have a blood relation connected to it, and when we say that blood is thicker than water, and in India something is known as, blood relation. So when we have that particular thing that is already happening, so when we give single fathers the permission to adopt a single girl child, I think so that can be exploitative to a lot of end, because we don't have very good laws regarding to it, neither we have awarenesses regarding to it. Also, that you talked about the live-in couples, I think so the same goes. Now, first of all, giving birth to a child, I think so it's just one part, but raising the child is a second part. Like when you go around and talk to a lot of people, when they give birth to a child, they just want to expand their family, or they just want to, that void in the life, they want to gap that void in the life. But a child cannot just be born out of for entertainment purpose for the family, right? It needs responsibility, it needs care, it needs someone to look after them. So when we talk about the living couple, first of all, we are not sure about the relation that they will have in the future. Second, if the relationship is itself a little uncertain, so how can they certain the future of the child that they are bringing into the world? Now, in the 2008 case, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong, it was a Japanese couple, Yamanji Mara. I'm just sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong. Now, they opted for surrogacy, and during the period of 9 months, they broke up, and both of them had a dispute of who will take the responsibility of the child. So this case went to the Supreme Court, and the final decision was that the child will go to the grandmother of Yamaji Makara. So we can definitely see that here the future of the child is in stake. So we must also seek that yes, you give right for every single person to expand their family, to bring in children of their own, or go for the means of adoption. But we cannot ignore the fact that the child, once being brought into the world or taken care of, has to be taken care of for the entire life. And you have responsibility for the child. So I think so we cannot just exactly say that this is wrong, but we must also say that why it is wrong and what other things can be done in order to make it in a more better way and include more people. So that is my opinion.
Yeah, so like keeping in mind the paucity of the time we have, and that this is being sternod as we speak, so like all your points are being noted. The next few speaks, we will make sure that it's just speeches. We'll not take interruptions, at least for so that it can be sternod. Then we'll move into the unmoderated part, like we are on an extension as of right now. So if you guys any questions or any deliberations, we can discuss that on in the unmoderated section of the of this particular session, just so that like it can be turned out properly. We'll just keep opening statements as of right now. Yeah. So, Karthik, I was that your opening statement to a certain degree, or would you like to add anything to that? I guess Karthik disconnected.
Yeah, he's
Okay.
not on the call.
Okay. I will try to connect with him. Other than that, yeah, Vanshita, if you'd like to go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So there'll be a lot of background noises, so I'll apologize for that in advance. So, surrogacy arrangements are medically, emotionally, financially, and legally complex. Um, the process has profound implications on children born through surrogacy, but also for people who have acted or wish to act as surrogates, and those who seek to become parents through surrogacy. In some countries, lack of regulation, which was the case in India before the bill was introduced, it can lead to exploitation, including by unscrupulous brokers who can use their financial leverage to control surrogates and violate their rights. There have been allegations of trafficking for the purpose of surrogacy, and cases where conflict arose between intending parents and a surrogate who was pregnant or had given birth. These issues have led to some countries to ban surrogacy altogether, and others to permit it only on an altruistic basis, which is the case in India, where the surrogate is not paid and should be a close relative to the parents. Now, this issue requires a careful consideration on how to protect the right of children born through surrogacy. Um, the process also have profound implications for the right of people who want to be surrogate, including for compensation and for people who see
Sorry.
surrogacy as their only hope for becoming a parent. Now, I would like to quote Professor Jennifer Lal, who has done some research work in this area. And she says, she explained it as a global phenomena, wherein she describes it as sperm coming from Denmark and egg coming from Cyprus and uterus coming from India. So, and largely, if you look at the whole cross-border culture of surrogacy, third world countries, the so-called third world nations, are greatly affected and impacted in this particular regard. And there's a very less research done in the particular area. And while there are researches based on cross-border surrogacy, there are a lot. There's a lack. There's a gap, as in how it impacts third world countries and undeveloped and developing countries. Now, I would also like to focus on human rights, which are at stake when it comes to the process of surrogacy. Firstly, I would like to highlight that there are two types of surrogacy. First is traditional surrogacy, which is also called straight surrogacy. It is a technique that begins with artificial or natural insemination, and continues until the baby is delivered. Uh, Traditional surrogacy, again, is not legal. It is not legally accepted in India, and this essentially indicates that the practice of conventional surrogacy is not permitted, and in fact is against the law. Now, I would like to highlight a case study. I would like to highlight a case this particular regard. Firstly, artificial insemination is a low tech technology. It is not, what I mean by low tech is it's not advanced. um there's um there's an instance that I would like to highlight. A staff nurse from San Francisco hospital, um, she described her experience that it was not uncommon for single nurses at the hospital to get the sperm from the willing male nurse and go home with a cup and a syringe and then inseminate themselves. It was that easy. It is that low tech that they would inseminate themselves and then deliver the baby. So this artificial insemination is that low tech, and I would like to highlight that in particular because this process, which is very complex, which is medically, again, financially, medically, and physically very complex, is can be done at such low tech scale. Now, there's a lack of research, there's a lack of medical literature in this particular area. um, for example, there's no research done as to cancer risk associated with the fertility drugs in the fertile women. There are researches on cancer risk associated with the fertility drugs in the infertile women, but not in the fertile women. So when somebody is going for this process of surrogacy, we are not sure what are the complication we are not sure the link between the cancer and the drugs that are being used. So that is at stake. And then I think one way to approach it, one way to like understand other rights that are that can get violated in the process, is to study them through case studies. Now, I would again like to quote Professor Jennifer Lal. She said that people these days do not read. So the basic and the most efficient way to reach out to people is through stories. And one way of that doing is filmmaking. And again, Ayushi, I think, mentioned a few movies, example Mimi, and there's another movie called My Sister's Keepers. These movies can obviously educate the people who educate the people and educate the legislators, which is a need. Because even when people are talking about the process of surrogacy, and people are at stake, the surrogate, they would take their informed consent. But if they are not aware, if they are not educated about the process, how is it an informed consent? Then that is a question that if they are not really educated on this topic, then it is not really an informed consent. um Now, again, second thing that I would like to highlight, that there is a competition of eggs when it comes to the process of surrogacy, and there are again instances that highlight that. And there is human clowning. That is, people would like to uh, do people would like to have particular genes in their child, and then there are things that follows. So all these things do make the process even more complicated. Now, when we're talking about all these complications, when we're talking about the rights that are violated, um, again, also I would like to highlight that the right of choice, the freedom of choice, is also violated when we talk about the rules and regulations of surrogacy. uh, I think Karthik mentioned that when the bill was introduced, there was no saying, there was no mention of LGBTQ community. There was no mention of people in living relationships. Now this harms the freedom of choice. Again, rules and regulations are highly important, and as Akansha also tried to explain it, that rules and regulation do help in making the process moral and principled. But I think it also then again, if we talk about in liberal sense, if we talk about from liberal perspective, it harms freedom of choice and the right the right of freedom of choice. And if I talk about it in terms of feminist perspective, then it is a woman's right. It's her body, it's her right. And as somebody mentioned, I think it was Shrishti who mentioned it, um, that nobody talks about the surrogate herself. And in even and in case that we live in patriarchal society, and especially in the case of India, it is it is very less, it is less likely to be the decision of the women herself. It is, she is at times, and mostly actually, she's mostly forced by her relatives, her husband, or some male, some patriarchal male in the family. So these are few things that needs to be highlighted, which include human rights, freedom of choice, freedom of choice of the women in particular. And now, banning surrogacy altogether is definitely not the solution. Uh, but there should be rules and regulations, and there should be rules and regulations at the international level. There are rules and regulations for each state, and some countries do not accept commercial surrogacy. Some has banned surrogacy altogether. Some countries still accept commercial surrogacy, but there are no regulations as such. So I think there should be rules and regulations at the international realm. United Nations should develop guidance on surrogacy that fully respects all the rights at stake and the rights of the stakeholders.
Very well. So, any questions to this particular opening statements? Yeah. So, yeah, we will take that in the unmoderated section. So, like, just to wrap it up, so that can be sternode as such. Moving on to the next speaker, Tejasvi, if you'd like to go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Just a sec. Am I audible?
Yeah, Tejasvi, you're audible.
Okay, hi everybody. So, as we all have noted till now that infertility is generally known as a social stigma in India, and it is hypothesized that the agony and the trauma of infertility is best felt and described by the infertile couple themselves. The growing surrogacy phenomena, in which women agree to have their bodies used to undergo a pregnancy and give birth to the resulting baby, is becoming a major issue of the 21st century. And surrogacy is often defined as a process of womb renting, wherein a bodily service is provided for a fee. The practice is, of course, fraught with its own complexities and controversies, and there are implications for this thing, for which there are legislations being passed by our parliament. So, few of the many issues raised by the surrogacy include that the rights of the children produced, the ethical and practical ramifications of the further commodification of the body of women, the exploitation of poor, low-income women desperate for money, and out of the several issues that surround this very controversial topic, I'm going to take the issue of the rights of children born out of surrogacy, never that are almost never considered, and transferring the duties of parenthood from the birthing mother to a contracting couple denies the child any claim to its gestational career and to its biological parents if the egg and or sperm is, I mean, not that of contracting parents, right? In addition, the child has no right to information about any siblings, he or she may have in the former instance. So, to put a small background, commercial surrogacy was legalized in India in the year 2002, and due to the absence of regulations, low cost of fertility clinics, as my um, friends over here in this forum have pointed to the low technology, and a large supply of poor women willing to provide the service, India became a hub for transnational surrogacy, which in the meantime was being abolished by the current regulatory regime. The practice of surrogacy raises complex legal and ethical concerns. And this why the regulation is important, because the main rationale which goes behind this is that it must balance the rights of all involved, and including the children also who are born out. So my argument is based on three premises. First goes like, a child is an independent holder of a range of comprehensive rights, and there that is why a holistic regulatory framework needs to be evolved that protects these rights. And as the right to a nationality, like, it becomes particularly complex when the foreign nationals come in India and contact the surrogates over here to have their baby being delivered through this process. It becomes in such conditions, it becomes really important for the child to know about his origin, his roots, and that he's cared for by his parents in that context about his origin nationality. Right? The second important aspect of this approach is the recognition that the fulfillment of parental responsibilities is central to children's enjoyment of their rights, and that is what is primary in the upbringing and development of their child, be it through this process, be it through the biological process. It becomes particularly important in that. And third, my premise rests on the need to bring out a framework of surrogacy, that it must be shaped by the principle of child participation, who is capable of forming his or her own views to express freely in all matters that affect him or her, and in his own ways, obviously, and due weightage be given in accordance with the age and maturity of that child who is being born. So, a children's right approach draws attention towards the fact that holistic and framework is required that protects the various rights of children, and that too at all stages of their childhood. And it stresses the importance of ensuring the framework that it is participatory, and that it incorporates in itself the views and experiences of the children. It also recognizes the central role of parents in protecting children's rights and the need for safe support. So, with this, I would end my opening statement. Thank you.
Okay, then moving on to the next speaker, Anjali, if you'd like to go ahead.
Sure. Um, I just want to briefly appreciate and acknowledge that the two people before me, Vanshita and Tejasvi, spoke a lot about the things that I want to cover, and I feel like it's sort of like I'm building on from that. So uh, I appreciate the things that you all said. Um, so where I am coming from is I'm a student in psychology, uh, a student of psychology rather. I graduated a few years ago, but so what I'm bringing to this space is um, an approach that speaks of where do we come from as a context and how does that impact the lived experiences of all the different people in this picture, and how can um, we as individuals and as a society make experiences better for everybody involved. So I don't think anybody over here disputes the fact that um, commercial surrogacy should be legalized for various reasons. I got a sense that that is the sense this room has. Um, but I think there are so many challenges, which is why it hasn't been done so far. Um, so there's this interesting theory. I mean, this is a basis of many theories in psychology, that there are thoughts, behaviors, and actions that all interact with each other to build systems and the way we think as individuals and as societies. So, obviously, the way we perceive the way things should be impact how we create our legislation. For example, a very simple truth that I think most people will agree on is murder is wrong. Therefore, criminalize it. Um, so we sort of build our frameworks basis things that we believe in. Um, Things become a lot more complicated when we bring identities into the picture. Would say in a patriarchal society, if men, or rather, it's not, I wouldn't even use that word, people without uteruses had the ability to reproduce, would our approach to legalization be different? Um, who is creating this legalization? Who wants control? Um, these are questions that frame how legislation is created. Um, so some things that are general truths about surrogacy is that they challenge the idea of a traditional family in many ways. Somebody who goes and opts for surrogacy is already deviating from the norm in many ways, in that there is a birth mother and there is an intended mother. Um, then there are obviously complications in the traditional versus the gestational one. In the gestational is where there is a different egg or different sperm, and both are merged together in an embryo and implanted in somebody's uterus. Whereas in many countries where altruistic surrogacy is pursued, um, specifically for people in single sex relationship, in same sex relationships, it's usually the egg of the person who's going to host the embryo, and the sperm from one of the other partners. So it's challenging the traditional notion that there is one egg, there is one sperm, both of these create a child, that child is brought up by that family. And all of this is obviously coming about because we realize now that this isn't the way everybody wants to or can operate. um, so in itself, it's a very revolutionary concept, surrogacy. It's very progressive in its very like nature as a concept, and it's very inclusive as well, as it makes space for all of these different identities. Um, so in that sense, like why why then are people finding it so challenging to accept it and sort of mainstream it? Um, and I think the answer to that, again, fairly straightforward, but yet so complicated. The fact that it threatens these traditional family systems is viewed both positively by people like me and negatively by people who wish to maintain patriarchal and traditional family systems. So, a research paper actually spoke about how prohibition of commercial and transnational surrogacy can be analyzed as a way to preserve these traditional family and gender norms. If I say you cannot do commercial surrogacy, and if I say surrogacy itself is not an option, then you're automatically not making space, not including a lot of people. Um, So, from the point of view of mental health, a lot of research has spoken about the mental health of the families who opt for surrogacy, the mental health of the surrogate mothers. Um, and most of these have identified that even though we often think that, oh, these people are really poor and they need it to, sustain their families, um, that nobody else would opt for something like this. um, People who actually go through the process of hosting an embryo are often not as devoid of agency as we want them to believe. However, if you operate, the more patriarchal a society is, the more they need consent of many other people involved. And that's often the problem. Their lived experiences are often affected by people around them and their perceptions of them. They often think they're doing something that's extremely necessary, empowering, kind, even. They seem to think that they're helping people out, that they're using the means that they have to provide a service, and often feel very empowered in their own actions, but believe that the way other people perceive this act that they're doing um, affects their experience, and that they worry, how am I going to explain this to people around me? How am I going to explain this to my husband? How do I explain this to my children? Um, and yeah, I think that is just because the idea of the traditional is so ingrained that this has to become this explanation, that this labor of explaining is something that's on surrogate mothers, on families that opt for surrogacy, um, which often makes it much harder to be, because all they're doing is just living. At the end of the day, they're just, you know, just trying to go about life, have a child, just live, no big deal. But it is a big deal. And so, where I'm coming from really is that it's okay. A lot of people who take care, who operate these systems like surrogacy clinics, they consider the importance of taking care of individual mental health. So they'll do counseling for the surrogate mother, they'll do counseling for the family who's going to get the baby. In countries like India, of course, no provisions made for people in live-in relationships or for homosexual people, as Karthik mentioned before. But for some people's mental health needs are taken care of in a very individual capacity, which is important. Of course, you need to counsel people, you need to make sure that they're okay, you need to make sure that they're prepared for the reality that this is. But at the same time, where I'm coming from is that legislation is not just to prevent exploitation, but it's also to lend credibility to different ways of being. So, what we do when we hear murder is wrong and therefore criminalize murder is sort of create a culture wherein you're telling people that this is, I mean, let's not murder people, murdering is wrong. You will go to jail if you murder. Um, Similarly, if you legitimize commercial surrogacy, and in fact, I would go as far to say that we need to start moving towards um, legitimizing LGBTQIA relationships, legitimizing live-in relationships as different ways of engaging in relationships. Why not? Whoever said marriage should be the only way for people to love? This would just make a lot of space for a community that has a good mental health. Um, so I actually think that catering to the mental health needs of surrogates is an individual and a systemic responsibility. The moment you legalize surrogacy, you add credibility to the entire transaction. So if people, it's sort of like a circle. People who are legislators, who are creating legislation, have an impact, have attitudes that impact legislation, but at the same time, legislation impacts attitudes. So it's this circle that keeps maintaining itself. Regressive people say surrogacy is bad, say it shouldn't be legalized. And then as a result, there are regressive attitudes towards surrogacy. So the circle sort of needs to be cut. Um, and that, I think, will pave the way for healthier attitudes towards different ways of having a family, towards different ways of envisioning an inclusive, healthy, not necessarily traditional, but valuable and unique society where people can just be. Um, so that's sort of where I was coming from. Um, yeah, if there are any questions, happy to answer.
Yeah, I'm so sorry to interrupt as well. Just a second. So yeah, Shalja, you can like switch to prep and you can send over the documents in 20 to 30 minutes. We can, and I guess we will inform. I will inform. Just inform Samay to join in around 1 o'clock if it is possible.
Yeah, okay, sure. No problem.
Great. So just like take 20 to 30 minutes, format it, and then send it over if it's possible.
Yeah, yeah, I'll provide it to you.
Okay. Thank you so much. Yeah, so before we move on to the like move on ahead, so like so we have exhausted the time that was supposed to be for unmoderated and pairing up. So like keeping in mind the constraints that we have, I just wanted like let's move on to the deliberative phase, and we can like like as like many most of you wanted to do individual reports, we'll just stick to the individual reports as of right now, and like let's do it with pairing up as of right now. So once that this is over, we can make sure that you guys can like co-author with one another and like pair up on your in your personal capacities, like we all have each other's contact details, and move we can move ahead in that particular direction like later on the session, keeping in mind we have exhausted the time for that. So yeah, like any other clarification, like any other clarification, observation, or questions. So we can start with Anjali first, as her statement was the first like the latest. Then we can move on to Tejasvi's and Vanshita's opening statements. And like this is the deliberative phase of this like of this forum. You anyone can feel free to like interrupt anyone. You they can be as many as follow-ups as long as you're not like uh, what should I say, like taking a lot of time from other people's speeches as such. Just make sure that you are as crisp as possible. Yeah, anyone. Yeah, so in even in that particular regard, I just wanted to like make an observation, like before anyone does. So Anjali, like I identified like so this is something that was very interesting to me, that uh, when we think about surrogacy, we tend to ignore the so like the societal norms that like what like societal norms that exist. So for many families, like tradition becomes a very important aspect when it comes to surrogacy, and it, as you pointed out, that like it totally infringes upon that particular idea and that particular worldview, that okay, this is something that is affecting us in a very affecting them in a very extreme manner, is seen as sort of a taboo. So like although like India has like a lot of India might have a legislation in this particular regard, but like awareness is more of a very important factor in this particular sense, that okay, many families do not have, like many families do not see this, or like traditional education does not it teaches us how to deal with this, like, and how to not see it as a taboo. So what do you think that like what should be done, that as you have said, that like let everyone live, and that sort of thing can be like ingrained into the societal like into the society in a particular sense, that might enable everyone to view this in a very, like, what should I say, like something that should be, that is very normal, and something that is that should not be made a taboo out of, as it is, as it stands right now.
Um, I think one thing that definitely helps is bringing voices of people who have these experiences into the picture. Um, I was actually looking for some testimonials, some literature written by people like this. Um, Surrogate mothers, surrogate people who have families made through surrogacy, listening to them, learning from their experiences, starting it right from childhood, like Tejasvi actually said very pointedly, um, normalizing the idea that, you know, these kids have such diverse roots from the very beginning. Um, they have, their family is not just their family who is paying for them or who's written on their paper. In fact, that's another thing that legislation does, right? It gets you to think about what's right, what's wrong, what are accepted versus non-accepted ways of being. For example, in most documents that you have to fill in, you are daughter of, wife of, and the men usually have name, father's name, or that's it, like they're not husband of. um, so similarly with surrogacy, with adoption, you have your birth mother, and then you have your adopted mother, or the person, the intended mother, who eventually ends up taking legal responsibility for the child. But they don't really accommodate these, like the how diverse this experience is, how rich this experience is. It's not just one player, it's not just two players in the picture. So I think legislation can lend so much credibility to this whole system. Like, just by legalizing it, you're signaling that as a society, this is something you care about. Then you'll start making more and more accommodations. You'll start thinking, okay, as a society, I think Akansha pointed it out. Men are not taking care of girls as well. But does that mean you don't allow them to adopt, or you don't allow them to go through surrogacy and have um, girl childs? Or do you create frameworks where it can happen well? So the idea of banning, prohibiting, I feel just makes problems worse. Create legislation, create more legislation, and then create more legislation that will accommodate and create culture. Um, yeah, so I think lend, giving credibility, validating these experiences instead of invalidating them through legislation, through storytelling, through movies, through education. um, I see that as a way of building a better culture. It's too complicated, it's not a quick fix at all, but it's too important to not do it.
Yeah, so any other comments and like observations as well, and like keeping in mind, like I like if you guys can like identify certain things. So like for example, when we are doing this particular forum, so what you might assume is like, for example, if you were like observant of all the speeches as such, so for I'm pretty sure that everyone had like a readership time of like 30 to 40 minutes each and every individual, like at least not 30 to 40 minutes, my bad, like most of you must have read like a lot of articles. So you guys like must have had like a conducive understanding, and through this opening statement what you had the opportunity to like what should I say, learn from the other people. So for example, if I am giving a speech or I'm making an opening statement, so and if I have read like personally 30 to 40 articles, so and I am presenting to you to you in a, like a very conducive format, so that is like a gold mine of information. And I like, so for that you guys have to like note like point, like what should I say, like be more observant around it. So this might seem like okay, these are like plain opening statements, but you have to take into consideration that okay, this particular, like including you, every particular individual would have like spent days or like have must have gone through dozens of articles just to get to that conclusion. So these observations, like we have sterned it and like we have like written it down. So just the moment we get the moment we get it, we like I will share the screen. So then after that we can move on to the phase of like what should I say? Like first of all, common trends. So like identifying stakeholders, identifying like gaps in that particular via the document, and then we can move on to the phase where we can say that okay, this is a particular research outcome that can be deliberated upon, or that can be taken up as a research paper. So like so guys, remember that this is like the very preliminary phase of like what we're trying to achieve. So the research work that is generated out of it is going to be what is that the thing that is going to be promoted, and that is going to be reflected all around. So yeah, keeping in mind so just make sure that this is like not the only thing that you guys end up doing, that like it's not just about the deliberation, but we also like there's this enthusiasm around the research writing process as well, and that may take some time. So just make sure that this like this process continues, and this is not like the first iteration of it, and or like only the like last iteration of it. So this is something that can be adopted as a trend, because generally what happens with research is that it has the most impact career, like from a career perspective. So for example, if you have a publication, it will be reflected throughout your life in your CVs, in your professional career. But like sadly we are not, like it is very non, what should I say, unglorious of sorts. So for example, if I want to publish a research paper, or if I want to write a research article, it's then generally in like some corner of a library, or like certainly like in a closed room of sorts. So what that does is that it like takes away the like the thrill of researching to a certain extent. What this does is that this makes us like having this kind of a session makes us question, like first of all it brings some deliberation into it and makes you like think out of the box. So it does not only like give like it gives your opinion a lot of like what should I say, room to expand. Like you will contend among one others, like, or you will observe multiple observations of different people. So that is like something that is interesting in what I came to observe through these speeches. And like for me at least it was very fruitful. And if you can like invest your time in it and like create what should I say, like amazing, you can create a lot of content and amazing research work out of it. So in that particular line, any observations and any conclusion that you could have drawn, or like any particular contention that you would like to point out?
Um, may I? Yes.
Yeah, yeah, there's a
Okay. Yeah. So, I made three observations. First of all, categorization of surrogacy is important because, as in the very initial stage of discussion, we had this concept being brought by one of the friends over here, ideal influencership. What we ignored was the fact that some women who have their career restrained. They're not entirely, this whole idea of surrogacy has got its own multi layered aspects to it. We cannot just confine it to one reason that, see, couples who are infertile will go for it. Second, women who don't want their bodies to undergo that kind of change that may hamper their career prospects or anything like that. Third, people who have money would go for it because they don't want to undergo the personal troubles of going actually go through this natural process and all. So what I need to bring to the table is that in such a scenario, putting this whole process of surrogacy into two categories, I think would with the provided a proper regulatory regime has been brought in by the government, is like altruism and commercialization because it has got its own pros and cons list. I mean, like first of all, if I talk about why altruism surrogacy has got its own pros as well, because first, like if a woman who is a close relative of that couple who is not able to bear a child, then the child can have the upbringing of both his or her parents, right? The children see the ties, the bond that a woman feels when with a child in her womb. That just cannot just go away with some sort of agreement that like, because let's face it, a woman has its own, like, a maternal instinct just cannot just go away as soon as that period, that span of 9 months just ended. And a certain type of psychological impact a woman undergoes through this whole span. So altruism has got its pro in that sense, right? Secondly, if I talk about commercial surrogacy in this aspect, couples who are apprehensive of the fact that their child might not get any sort of STD or sexually transmitted disease or something like that of the sort, or if one of their close relatives, like we cannot just have a close net of people. Like everybody does not have a close knit of friend circle or relative for that matter, because relative has been specifically included in this particular definition by the legislation of our country. So, if a couple who is apprehensive of their baby in that sense, I mean, the whole process of how their baby would be brought in this world, I think commercialization can help in that because there are special clinics for that. And I can even share screen showing a report of the same. This report was being taken by Center for Social Research by it's an NGO funded by the central government. So it has got its own authenticity in that as well. So regarding that, this, but again, at the end of the day, these clinics wherein there are proper regulatory regimes for that are strictly confined to these metropolitan cities of Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore. And again, like as I said in my one of the previous objectives, that Anand, that this village in Gujarat is known as the cradle of the world. I mean, there are some few rural areas which can stand out as an exception, but again, I mean, the women in rural areas are not really aware of that, and that there is a like a great possibilities wherein these middlemen who contact them for such services that these couples want, they again end up exploiting these women, and of course, when the contract, these women, most of them are illiterate, and that they don't have a formal acquaintance with the terms of the contract as such, and that leaves a huge ground for exploitation in that sense. So what I am proposing in like pro for commercialization of surrogacy is that couples who bring I mean who are apprehensive of their baby's health. And secondly, if they don't, let's face it, in altruism, if they don't want any tie from the biological mother of the child, because at some point of time, there may be some legal complications that obviously nobody can foresee, and that may arise at some point of time. So, in order to avoid that, commercialization is a go for those couples. And of course, then there is a con for commercialization. Sorry, is that in case of twins, it is entirely what I came across when I was researching is that the problem wherein twins are born. I mean, it is entirely left to the discretion of the couple who is contacting the surrogate to, like if in case they come to find out that twins are gonna be born at the end of this time period, then it is entirely to the discretion of the couple whether or not they accept the twin or not. And then again, it poses a huge mental and financial burden on the woman who is bearing the child of that particular couple, right? So that is again a loophole that needs to be addressed. And moving on to altruism again, like this is something which is, not in favor. I'm not in favor. Obviously, most of you will all agree with me that revering hero worship in such situations. Why would a woman end up giving a child who she has in her womb for this entire long period of 9 months? So why would a woman end up giving her child just like that, right? So commercialization, I think, can help in that way. And entirely, and moving on to my point of ideal influencership, I think it's masses in India are not entirely influenced by that. They have their own reasons as well. I mean, that is why this bracket of 5 years certificate is being given by the government. And the ART bill is a lot more progress on the earlier surrogacy bill, and I think the narrative has been like really well brought out by one of the friends in the forum. And yeah, that's that. Anybody else who would like to add on or object to any of my points that I any add on, guys?
Yeah, so any particular additions in that particular regard? So we'll be getting what should I say? So from what I can observe is that there's like a lot of deliberation around the commercialization of surrogacy to a larger degree. So like when it comes to creating a framework in that regard, like whether legalizing that, like what would be the impact of legalizing that, and what should be a framework around commercial when it comes to legalizing commercial surrogacy in India, what might be negative and positive impact. So that can also be identified as a research gap in that particular regard. That how like what would be the general impact of it, and what kind of empirical studies, or like what kind of uh, what kind of like data should we refer to when it comes to when it comes to policy making. So that there's this like very positive and like very deep questions of policy making when it comes to the legalization of commercial surrogacy. So what happens is when you commercialize a particular what like for example, for that matter, any practice, uh, it tends to what should I say, like it tends to attract exploitation in a certain level. So commercialization can lead to that aspect as well. So like we need to take into focus stuff like safety, like women safety and other particular aspect that might be overlooked in certain manners. Commercialization might also like lead to what should I say, like this being viewed in a particular light. Now, like, what should I say, like in a positive, like for me, I believe that like it might be viewed in a positive light, something that is considered normal, because what as of right now, like altruistic surrogacy is something that is like a very rare phenomena. It has to be, you do not see it being done often. So when a particular practice adopts a commercial nature, what it does is that it promotes like regularity of it. Then you see it happening more often, and that also tends to eliminate the aspect of taboo from it. I guess like this is some sort, like this might seem very extreme, but I guess this is sort of observation from my end to a certain extent. Apart from that, any other like observation that you guys would like to make in this particular regard, or even like interrupt?
I think in terms of yes, yes, Tejasvi, please go ahead.
No, I did not include the rights of children in my summary part because I thought that was something that I put forward and something to it, then I would deliberate on it. I mean, rights of children is something that becomes very crucial, and I mean, there is like no regulatory framework for that. I mean, we lack laws in that respect because let's face it, the UN Convention on Child Rights has not been that recognized in India so far. Because a child is not really seen as a person who would have its own independent thoughts, his or her own independent thoughts and opinions. And I think that is something which we need to incorporate. And in England, I mean, there is this regulatory regime for which actually recognizes these three trusts which I spoke upon, and the 1989 adoption of that UN convention. That is something which we need to look forward to, and I think it would be really great if somebody would add on to that. Thank you.
I have something to say, and in response to this, I forgot to during my opening statement, but Tejasvi mentioned that I think you mentioned the UN should be involved in creating an international framework on how.
No. I did not talk about UN intervention. Because the charter already exists. And what the like my main rationale behind quoting this particular thing is because it recognizes child as an independent right holder. I mean, it has this whole list of rights of what all a child has. So I mean, and that is why from that convention I based my three senses of argument. So that is what I
Sorry, your voice became very faint by the end of it. What did you say?
Yeah, I was saying that my rationale to include UN convention was not to, really, it was more of like a foundation on which I based my premises, and to emphasize upon the fact that has child has got his or her own rights as well, and he should also have a participatory say in this whole process, and that is why we need a holistic framework for the thing. So, and I quoted England's regime of framework as well, because that is why. That's what I wanted to point out.
Right, and just like to add one more observation that I think I could make was that in this entire forum we were discussing at length, the impact of culture and social acceptance of the practice vis-a-vis the legislation on it, vis-a-vis its regulation, right? So I just have a few questions that I think this forum could elaborate upon and collectively answer. We had people talking about the impact of celebrities opting for the practice in personal capacity, and we also deliberated upon the impact of movies or entertainment literature as such on the society as a whole in terms of culture building. So I could identify personally a few questions that I think this forum is very well equipped to answer, and those were: number one, what are the positives and negatives that we can see in the society when let's say celebrities opt for the practice in a personal capacity versus when we make movies on it, which are not based on, which are not first hand real experiences, which have direct influence but are more towards the effort of spreading education. So that was one question that I think would be very important according to me. Another question that I could think of was when Anjali was talking about the mental health of surrogate mothers, and
Machita was talking about how, filmmaking could help and everything. There's a very pertinent question in law that I think is, the need of the hour to be answered, and that is, does culture and social acceptance come before legislation, after it, or during it? So, because, even in certain other policies which are not directly related to surrogacy, but definitely related to the whole process of lawmaking, like in the farmers' protest, we observe that, when Anjali is supporting legislation to promote surrogacy culture, we also see sometimes that when a legislation is introduced without much social acceptance, understanding, or let's say just allowance within the society of the regulations that it proposes, sometimes that legislation also blows up. Sometimes that can also be used to, manufacture dissent as such, or just it can just be a breeding ground for dissent. So this is one very important question that I think we should answer, that, when does the culture come in place? Before the legislation, during the legislation, as it's being argued, as it's being put into place, or after the legislation has already been put into place? And what is the role of, political representatives here? So yeah, that was my observation, I think.
Can I?
Uh,
Sorry, go on.
okay, okay. No, you just go ahead.
I'd like to take a shot at answering both, if you don't mind, but I'll keep it brief. To do with the first one, I was thinking, I personally feel like there is more merit in the latter, in storytelling, and that could be biographical or fictional. It doesn't necessarily have to be one or the other. But I feel like what happens with celebrities is that they are so removed from our context in so many ways. Like, while we see them as real people, they're just real people with too varied an experience from us. So, for example, with a different, in a different context, me wearing a spaghetti dress and going outside is viewed very differently from Deepika Padukone doing it. Like, our realities are too different for there to be any, like, it feels like a different fictional universe altogether, where of course okay दुनिया में तो चलता ही है ये सब, as in it works in their life, for those who didn't understand Hindi. So I personally feel like the latter would help communicate realities much more differently and much more effectively than us looking to celebrities to sort of see how our society should function, because their world is very different in many ways. And so taking that and translating it, or trying to derive some universal truths and meanings from their lives, is often something people just don't do. Like, it's very easy to it's, I mean, they are people at the end of the day, but people don't process them like that. They're viewed as these outsiders who live these very different lives from us. So I think there are stories such as there's this show called This Is Us, which has explored surrogacy, newer conventions and ways of thinking about it, like having an open relationship where the surrogate mother is part of the new life of the baby and their family. um, so such stories being told in fiction or as biographical stories, I feel, gives us a real picture of how more real people use surrogacy in their lives, or how it surrogacy impacts real people. I don't mean to take away from the realness of celebrities, but I just feel like there's a detachment in the way we see them. But that's the first one. And the second one, really good point, really good question. And I think an answer to that from my end would be that our people who these legislations are meant to serve being considered while the legislation is being made. Are there people who are key stakeholders who are going to be impacted sitting in that board deciding on legislation? Do we have surrogate mothers who have gone through the experience? Do we have people of different identities who would be interested in surrogacy on the board, who are creating the legislation? Therefore, when legislation is for the people, it needs to be by the people it is for. I feel like that would answer the question of how do you create a culture that will, how do you ensure the right culture is being translated into your legislation. And I get that it won't be like a question of if this is to be legalized. It's not like everybody's going to jump on board and say, wow, yeah, let's go for it. But yeah, I mean, I just feel like interests need to be best represented. So that would be my answer to that question, and that would solve that issue, according to me, or at least do something to solve it, if not completely solve it.
Okay, so now I want to add something and point out my few observations. First of all, I actually feel that the need for the proper influencing, as the Anjali Di mentioned, is very much required. And why not just consider the celebrities in it? There are reality shows, there are talk shows. We can bring common people who have gone through this process and we can talk to them. Like when we saw that Varanasi girl who won the second, who was the second runner up for Miss India. I am not sure her name was Manasa Sharma. I'm really not sure about the name. But we saw that how after that particular thing, she was, brought to different reality shows. Though she was a second runner up, but she was brought to the reality show where she told that, okay, I was, differentiated on the basis of my look, my height, my family income, my family stature, everything. So when we see, the real life people coming and speaking on this particular issues, we felt that yes, the beauty standards that we have set in needs to be taken. The beauty standards must not be so rigid. First of all, I particularly feel that there must not be a beauty standard at all. But definitely as in India, we have set a beauty standard, the fair complexion and everything. But when she came out and spoke, I think so she broke that wall that was laid over there, and she gave a thought to everyone that why are the pageant shows basically focusing more on the external beauty rather than the talent of the woman, because it is something that represents the power of women. So that particular thing, that what she did will be in the minds of everyone who will be attending and seeing any pageant shows later on. So I think so. First, we have a celebrity couple, but we must also understand that the celebrities do not have a proper link with the common people. We are not able to understand their life. So, more than celebrity, that is one part, but I think so. The real life people must be included in the shows. They must be brought in the shows, and people must listen to them. So that's the first point that I want to say. Now, second point, I'm not sure who was mentioning about the rights of the child born through surrogacy, but the ART bill that was passed, in that we have section 31 of the bill that provides that child born through assisted reproductive technology shall be deemed to be a biological child of the commissioning couple, and the said child shall be entitled to all the rights and privileges available to a natural child only from the commissioning couple. So we definitely have a law which is made to give these children a right. Now, as we talk today, that there is a law on a paper, and then there is a law that needs to be implemented in the ground reality. Now, in my personal opinion, what I feel is that giving birth to a child is one step that is done. But more than that, it is the life that you give to a child afterwards. Like, okay, you went through a lot of process, you went through surrogacy, you went through ART and all, and gave birth to a child. Now, you had a different mindset at that particular time. So maybe you do not have that same mindset after the child is born. You may be like, if you go by surrogacy, you have a mind that, okay, it was not me who gave birth to a child, but it was some else women who did that thing. So that the emotional connect the parent might lose from the child. So, and there can be a lot of other reasons also, like, okay, we went through this particular technology, and it is something artificially created rather than something natural, because we have people with different mindset. So what I feel that these mindsets must be taken in consideration, because it is a large society of people that have these mindset. First is the mindset, second we have the legislation made. The legislation must be seen like the different departments, the judiciary, they are implementing it. But we must also see that these, the mind, the thought process that we have, there must be a society or a board that addresses these solution. And I think so these all can be grouped as a mental health also. And like proper bodies, the NGOs, the psychiatrists, they can go and see that okay, if a couple went through an alternative way that was not a natural, are they accepting it or not, and are they happily together or not? So that particular thing must be seen. I feel that uh, proper boards, proper departments must be setting up for ensuring that particular aspect, the emotional and the mental aspect. Now the third perspective that actually I want to present my point of view, and I also want to know everyone what everyone else's thing. Now when we talk about the feminist perspective of the thing, like a woman has the right to do what she wants to do with the body, we must also take into the consideration that the childbirth is not just limited only to a woman. It is a couple's journey. So definitely a man should have a say in it. That also, it cannot be a woman's individual decision. Like there can be decisions sometimes like, okay, I don't want to go through this particular process because of my career thing, because of my I don't want to get because of my bodily thing. I think so. This particular decision must be made by the understanding of the couple as a whole, because parenting is something, is a responsibility that must be shared equally by both the parents. So the decision of it must also be taken by both the parents. Now that is my first point of view. Second, when we talk about the commercial, the pros of the commercial surrogacy, I actually, as my feminist perspective, I particularly see that this is very exploitative for a lot of women. Because when we see commercial surrogacy, we see a lot of involvement of the money thing, and we know that money will be the person who will be holding that will definitely have manpower and influences also. So it will be limited to the elite society, and they will be using those who are definitely not the part of the elite society, and I'll say very like downrodden societies. They will be opting for the women who are from the poor background, who do not have that literacy knowledge and anything. So I see a big con of the commercial surrogacy was the exploitation of a lot of women from the village background, from the sex workers. I see a lot of things going wrong there. Also, we must see that a woman's health is also required. She cannot just be taken as a tool that okay, you just have to reproduce and reproduce. So when this law was made for the banning the commercial surrogacy, and this in the surrogacy bill it was made that a mother can be made surrogate only once. So I particularly think that this is for the benefit of the women, because when we take off the part, I may not be able to connect the dots exactly, but when we take to the part, if we see the pros of commercial surrogacy, that it provided an opportunity for employment, but we must also see that employment came at the cost of 9 months of health also. And when I particularly favor more of a ban on commercial surrogacy, because owing to a lot of particular things, we know that there is a middleman involvement in it. We were seeing that the embryo that was used for a lot of scientific and experiment works, that was really not acceptable. And also it was a lot of exploitation for the women, because you took a woman, okay, this is for one task, this is the second task, this is the third task. We need to let those women think out of the bracket of given birth. So I particularly favor more of altruistic surrogacy compared to commercial one. Now the altruistic one, but altruistic surrogacy, because I feel that this umbrella term can also be taken as the government's aim to bring to the side of more of adoption side, because from a report of 2017 we saw that in the past few years the people adopting less is a very big reason. The adoption rate has gone really less because of the demand of the same blood and everything. I think so people need to come out of it. You can go for adoption ways also. We need to promote that particular thing. First is adoption, is that I feel that this altruistic surrogacy can have the hidden words and the meaning behind it. I think so it may give a privilege to the adoption part. Second, I feel that when you go for altruistic surrogacy, you know that the person who went through it, the surrogate mother, definitely had a consent in it, and it was just not for the money purpose. But here there is a lot of pros and cons can be attached to it, because we see that the entire childbirth process is again a so stringent concept in the family. So how can we ensure that the mother who went, like the surrogate mother who opted for it, her consent was taken into 100% consideration and she was not forced? So what I personally think, like, I don't support commercial surrogacy at all, but when we talk about the altruistic surrogacy, I particularly feel that a lot of regulations need to be done, because one part definitely needs to be understand that why will a person risk everything for a free cause, right? And that particular thing must be taken care, that how will she, her life must be taken into priority, she must be the main character of that particular thing. Second, the part where the surrogate mother needs to be the close relative, I particularly find this concept very shallow, because that will always result in a lot of family dispute for the person itself and for the child later on. We need to understand that things cannot change. We are living in 2022. We cannot go just directly switch to 2050. We need to go step by step, step by step. So that is all what I want to say. So what I feel, that instead of making it to a black or white, we must go for a grayer side, where we can see a more regulations in the part of altruistic surrogacy, so that the people who actually need benefit from it avail the benefit from it. We take into consideration of physical, mental, emotional, every health of the surrogate mother, and we see that it is a win-win situation for everyone, and no one gets exploited because of that. That's what I want to say.
So okay, so guys, we have received the document like that has been so I would like to share it with you guys, and then we can move into the documentation phase to to a larger extent. So this is like a very rough document, as it was like made simultaneously while you were speaking. So what it should do is like it should give you very rough pointers of like what everyone was trying to portray in their opening statements and their further speeches. uh, and like from that we can like identify, we can collectively identify like, yeah, so from that we can collectively identify particular research gaps and particular research outcomes for our respective reports. Any observation that you might have had like for other speeches, or even for um, um, the gaps that you were able to identify on your own, we can move forward into the documentation phase of the session. And you can like just take 30 to like 40 minutes to like create your individual reports, and then we'll move on to the in like the report discussion phase. So feel free to take a break of sorts, and I'm just going to share the document on the group. And the stenographer faces some issues in in the latter half, so Tejasvi's and Anjali's speech are like very bare, like the information provided is not apt enough, so you can like just refer to like either like Tejasvi and Anjali, if you have your speeches with you like in a written format, just share it in the WhatsApp group. Or else what we can do is that well, at least I can share the document with you, and you can take a reference from it and create your individual reports, and at least like of the earlier speeches as such.
I
If
just wrote a very rough draft of my speech. I
so,
hope.
yeah, it would be great if you could like share it if it is possible. Other and Anjali, like, do you have a rough draft of your speech as such?
Could you
I
just
just
give me 10 minutes to like actually
No, no, it's not an issue.
update?
If you have it, it's good. If you don't, it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, I
Like,
don't have it in that proper sense. I
hmm.
just wrote out the pointers and I reiterated the pointers thing. That's
Then
what I
it's
did.
not an issue. That's not an
same.
issue. So what we are going to do is I'm going to share the document as such. Guys can take 20 to 30 minutes, create like individual reports, and then we'll move on to the discussion phase, and like the kinds of research outcomes and what should I say, the research gaps that we were able to identify, and then like to conclude the session in a certain to a certain degree. Yeah, before that, any other observations that anyone would like? I hope I'm not cutting anyone off as such. Yeah, Kansha.
Actually, it's not an observation. I had like few queries regarding the report
Hmm.
writing one. First is like when we write a report, so like we must include whatever we understood from the interview, like all the different perspectives that we heard, and club it together as a report, or the report must be exactly what I said. or it must be a clubbing of everyone's report and what I learned from the event?
Okay, so what we require you, so for example, right, when it comes to writing a research paper, they generally tend to have a hypothesis. So, for example, what might be a hypothesis might be something like what should I say, like a research question of sorts. That okay, like what, for example, like a very basic hypothesis might be like, don't take this as a standard, like the impacts of accepting commercial what should I say, like the impacts of accepting commercial surrogacy. So so that forms a short hypothesis. So like what can be its so what can be its negative impacts, what can be its positive impacts. So that can form like a small hypothesis, like a question of sorts. So that might be considered as a research question, and in that particular line you can create like pointers around it. So like okay, I guess I'm not so for example, a research hypothesis can be also something based around what should I say, so like your observation in a point, like in a crisp and pointed manner. So like once you read it, you can get a grasp, like a grasp of what we are trying to portray over here. Okay, so let me think of a better example. Hmm. So, for example, if we are able to, like, for example, what can be like, what should I say? Hmm. So, like, for example, like somebody pointed out that altruistic, like you yourself pointed out that altruistic surrogacy can be the like should be adopted. So, what that can be pointed out that okay, the impact analysis of altruistic surrogacy and what can be the like the surrounding uh, legislation or framework around it. So, like for example, if you have a general framework in your mind, you can create a report around it, right? So, like in pointers as such, that okay, this is that this should be taken into consideration, and then have it presented over here. So, for example, I will just share the document. Now, your entire screen. Yeah.
Okay, but just a second. I just want to point out that I didn't say that altruistic surrogacy must be adopted. I said a lot of regulations still needs to be done
Mhm.
because it still contains a lot of loopholes. That's what I said.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Like if I might have missed that. So just like taking into in examples. For example, Shishri pointed out that okay, let us adopt a uniform system. So this like might be this is a very basic documents of sort. So for example, responsibility, like for example citizenship, when we are considering this citizenship of a child, responsibility falls on the surrogate mother in case of the parents don't turn up. And when we talk about countries like India, and that intent of parents and of the child, where in the UK surrogate is a legal mother. So this is a research question, right? Because in India we do not have a like in it, so in India we might not have a parallel in that regard. So you have to like create a document that has certain pointers that we can like sum up, like that can sum up your research, so that we can move on into the document, like when we like have a look at the document, you can move on into a research phase. So like creating a research paper around the like your findings as such, sample. And for example, yeah, so when we talk about like the social and behavioral aspect of surrogacy, so when we talk about modes of pregnancy, infertility happens in when you go towards the structure. If a couple is unable to conceive, you usually go for a lot of, so these kinds of pointers, like you can identify such pointers and like note it down, create a document, and then present it that okay, so this is a particular research gap that I have identified, or this is a particular research outcome that I have come to, and then we can discuss and deliberate upon it, that okay, uh, that that okay, this is something that has been done, and then we can move on to the research phase. So that will come after like this session is over. What we'll do is we'll provide you with the formats like of how like, well, first of all, I would like to you guys to pair up like in on your personal capacities, even if you, and then we will provide you with the formats and like the journals that we are going to target after this particular session is over. But this report like will give you a very basic framework of how to move, or like give you a mental framework on how you guys need to move forward. And we'll be clubbing it and presenting it on our websites and what should I say, our on forum as well, and like taking it as a framework for our later iterations. So make sure that it is like crisp, it is clear, and like it is able to point out like what are your observations and research outcomes were in a, like what should I say, in the format of pointers as such. Nothing very like like very, what should I say, detailed, and very nothing very detail oriented, because it just has to like serve as what should I say, a document through which you can like identify uh, the possible avenues of research. I hope I'm making sense. Like I guess I lost track. Uh, like I hope I'm making sense. And if you could identify, if you want, I could like sum it up and give you a shorter explanation.
Yes, can you just please sum up? Because just a second, na, what I understood that right now we have to make a report and then we will be presenting on screen if I'm not wrong, and we'll discuss on the report. Then
Exactly.
later on when the event is over, you will be providing us with like a proper format to how to prepare that report, and that we will be preparing in pairs.
Yeah, so not a report, you'll create a research paper. The
Okay.
report will be a like a foundation for it. So generally what a research paper requires is a hypothesis. So when you like the research outcomes you have identified will serve as a hypothesis for like a perspective research paper. What I would want you guys to do is like pair up in like for example, if one's a student from Nirma University and a student from like a student from outside. So what we can do is that we can provide you with like we can make sure that you are able to connect with professors, as like some of our professors as well, and then we can provide you with like all the support we can get, because then we will be able to get a university mandate as that. Okay, like everyone is include is like pairing up with a student as well. So that will enable us to like give proper guidance as such. Like I can we can help you like come in contact with some of our alumni who have proper publication. So take this discussion as like a preliminary to research creation. So that is going to be our foremost what should I say, the foremost objective of our like this whatever this deliberation has been, so that we can move ahead in that particular direction. The document you're going to create now is just going to like just going to serve as a proper or like not even a like it was going to serve as a report that might or that will point out that okay, these are the hypotheses, these are the research outcomes that I have identified, and we are going to work upon it that and create a research paper. So just take it in that particular sense. So nothing very detailed, just short pointers, and then we can move ahead with it. I hope I'm making sense as such.
Okay, can I just ask something?
Yeah, 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 go ahead.
Yeah, when you told about the pairing up of things, now
Hmm.
since like four of us, if I'm not wrong, four of us belong to different colleges and four of us belong to Nirma University. So you told that you'll get us connected with the different alumni for the the guidance one. So
Hmm.
that pairing up process will be done by your side, or we will have to pair it up in personal capacity.
You can pair up in your personal capacity as well, like you can like in the WhatsApp group. If you're not able to pair up, we'll make sure that you are connected to an individual as like like what should I say, like you are connected to an individual. Most probably I don't think that would be a problem. Even in case you're not able to, it's not an issue, we'll still provide all the support that is required. Like pairing up with a Nirma student would be encouraged, because like that will enable us to bring the university mandate. Even in cases like you're not able to, it's not a problem, we'll try our best to make sure that all the support that is needed you're provided with that when it comes to research paper creation. Yeah.
Can I also understand the timeline a little bit? I know today was meant to be until 2 o'clock.
Yeah.
Uh, so we write the report and everybody presents what they have done all by 2, or are we extending it, or do we meet another time?
So that is also something that I would like to discuss. So like okay, we can, what we can do is that you can submit us you can all submit us the report, because obviously we are reading this like reaching the end of the session. On like if somebody, we can keep a 20 like or if somebody has it like a doubt in their report creation format, or like uh, to that particular aspect, or like if it requires a lot of more deliberation, we can have a particular session what should I say, uh, dedicated to that. Otherwise what we can do is that we can you guys can take 30 minutes, form your reports, submit it to us, and we'll provide a drive link, and everyone can have a look at everyone else's report. So you'll have like a repository of sorts when it comes to, what should I say, when it comes to creating research works from then onwards. So any particular, so what is your guys' opinion on it? Should we we end the session around 2 and move on to the research phase, or would you like to deliberate more upon the reports that you create in your next 30 to 40 minutes as such?
Sorry, I missed hearing that first part of this last question.
Okay, so I like to sum it up in a small, basically what we can do is, like, in the next 30 minutes, you guys can create your individual reports, deliberate it here itself among your peers. Or what we can do is, in next 30 minutes, create a report, submit it to us. We'll create a drive, and you can reference it for your future works as such, and deliberate upon in your personal capacity among yourselves, right? So they are the two options that we have, because like obviously we are reaching the end of the session, and many of us might have like prior commitments and all. So that's like totally upon you guys. And I'm so, any particular like ideas in that particular regard, anyone who wants to like move ahead with uh just the submissions, and like later on deliberation happens like post sessions, or you would like to have the deliberation in the session itself?
But
I
yeah, as
prefer
of now, can we have the report submission and then the deliberation, like afterwards?
Yeah, like post session, like should we end this particular session, or like afterwards as such? For what do you mean in that particular?
I intend like we can end it right
Hmm.
after the submission of the report.
Okay. So it's not, yeah, it's not an issue. So anyone who wants to like deliberate it right now, so like we can make sure that you have like a 10-minute gap, like 10 minutes speaker time to like deliberate it among your peers.
I personally want that when we submit the report, I just want to have a
Hmm.
deliberation then and there for the report, because it will help in understanding, like, okay, if this is my thought process, then what others think upon it, and we can come to a proper conclusion.
Okay, so we can have a deliberation for Akansha's report. Anyone else would like to have a deliberation of sorts?
I'm very sorry to interrupt, but can you please, if it's not important, can you please stop presenting? Actually, it's creating a problem with the live stream.
Yeah, yes. So yeah, go ahead. So anyone else would like to like have a collective deliberation on their respective reports that they're going to submit as such? Okay, seeing none, guys, take a 30 minutes break and like form a report, and then what we can do is that first of all we can have a you can we can have a deliberation of Akansha's report in the last 10 minutes, and then we can move on to the research phase as such. Like we can end the session, and then we'll move on to the research phase.
Now, if none of us are deliberating on anyone's report, then I just don't want my report to be deliberated alone on this stage.
Okay.
So, what we
Hmm.
can just do is, like, if we can get a brief overview about the event, like, who, if any, is anyone judging us right now, or something like that?
So no, actually, so see, this is not what we are hoping to do is that everyone will get what should I say, acknowledgement letter in this particular regard, that okay, you are part of this session. But the research creation is the like main aim of this particular session. So the research paper that you create out of in reference to the session will would be like the thing that would be judged upon, because that is going to be published, right? So that is what we are hoping to do. The research creation is the aim of the session rather than just the deliberation part, right? So this is like the was the very preliminary part of a like research creation process, so that you might take what should I say, inspiration from the research and the observations made by other people. So that's what we are going to do it. We are going to create a single repository. All the reports that have been made would be submitted in documents that will represent all your research in a crisp format. What we are hoping to do is that if you guys might have read like like if you have any other documents, and if you might have gone through any other kinds of research articles, so we are also going to make a repository of that as well. That would be done in the WhatsApp group. Once you have paired up, what we are going to do is that we are going to provide you, like, for example, the kinds of like what we are going to do is that we are going to provide you any and every form of guidance that is required when it comes to research creation. So that would be like we would allow make sure that you're connected with all some of the professors in our universities when it comes to research paper creation, and they will give you a general guidance on the kind of journals you can target, and like some of our professors and our alumni, so on the kind of journals you can target, and we'll make sure that you are provided with a proper guide when it comes to research paper creation. Okay, then, yeah. So, any other particular doubts? Also, like this is going to be a very, like this is going to be like a long process as such. So you have to keep patience because like creating research paper generally requires a couple of months, uh, like like what should I say? Come on, a couple of months. Takes around a couple of months or like multiple weeks when it comes to finally creating the document as such. So you have to be patient with that in that particular regard. So just take this as a preliminary form of what should I say? Some preliminary form of exercise to a research paper that might be publishable on a very reputed platform. At least we're going to make sure that it's published on the SRC like SRC website or on the Nirma Journal. Other than if it is like of certain quality, but other than that, we can always like we'll make sure that it's of certain such a quality that we can target foreign journals and uh, foreign platforms as such. So that is the aim what we are hoping to achieve over here. Baki, even if like if you're not like obviously life happens, and in case you're not able to continue that, we'll make sure that everyone has an acknowledgement letter. So I guess that sums it up to a certain degree.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask that. So Shrishti mentioned that there are countries like France,
Hmm.
Germany, and Italy, which have completely banned surrogacy, and then there are countries which allow altruistic surrogacy, and then there are countries like US and Russia which allow even commercial surrogacy. So I wanted to ask if in my research I can take this up as my topic to have a comparative pestle analysis between France and say India, and compare
Hmm.
the two countries, then how the pestle analysis, how their social, environmental, political, and ethical and technological aspects impact the policy making of both the countries. So it's
Yeah, yeah. It's not an issue. Like you can always like take inspiration from other like statements and other observations that were made. So that is the objective of this session, that we are able to identify like multiple topics and multiple what should I say, you can take inspiration from others people's statements as well. So like to make a cumulative form of
yeah.
research, like we are taking, what should I say, like if certain observation has made can help you in your particular personal research, feel free to go ahead with that. So I guess that like sums it up to a certain degree. So I hope like I was clear, and if there are any particular doubts in this regard. Okay, then.
Ritvik, sorry, one question.
Hmm,
It's not to do with the research question, but to do with the report.
hmm,
I've personally never written a report in half an hour.
okay, it's not. It's.
I was just wondering if
Hmm.
we could have a bit of flexibility in that deadline because I feel like it'll need a bit of time to process and compile. Or maybe you can give us a template of what the expectation is for this report, whether it's likely to be possible in 25 minutes. Because I've honestly just never done that in my life.
Yeah, okay, it's understandable. So what we can do is that let's end the session over here. I will give you the stenograph document, and then what we can move ahead with is that we can make sure that take the day, take the day, and by even if by 11 you have like tonight you have a report, just send it to us on the. I will provide you the mail, the SRC. Then we'll create a Google Drive, and everyone can have a look as well. I will make sure that if it is possible, I will create a template of sorts of a possible report and send it to you by everyone by evening. So that can also be done if it is possible. Because see, what I thought that okay, 30-minute, what should I say, a 30-minute deadline should be given so that everyone would do it right now when the session is fresh in your minds. So after like if you take a 1 hour gap or like a 2 hour gap and then you sit down to write some, you might miss out on certain aspect that you might have observed. So that's the thing. So what I wanted this report was to be just like basic pointers that can enable you to identify and remember like whatever the observations that were made in this particular session. So that's just it. Even if you want to take extra time, it's not an issue. Like it's totally upon you. I'll make sure that we'll share the stenograph document. So